Hello, I would like to welcome you all to our webinar. My name is Chantal Wierix and I'm the Business Development Director at Biocorp. And I'm very pleased to have you all here with us today as we have two speakers that will provide you with a complete overview of the solutions, promises and challenges of connected syringes. So the first speaker is Arno. If I can move further with the slides, that's perfect. So Arno is our VP Business Development at Biocorp, and the second speaker will be Bernard Vrijens. He's the CEO and scientific lead at Ardix Group. So before we start, let me just inform you that on the top right-hand corner of your screen, you can find a sidebar with 3 tabs, one for the chat, one specific to ask your questions, and one for the polls. So the speakers will allocate some time at the very end of this webinar to address questions or thoughts that you may have and want to share with us. So please write them in this question tab and not in the chat tab. We will select some of the questions that will be answered by our speakers, and all the remaining questions will be replied to in person, in writing, during or after the event by email. Also, there will be 3 polls published during the sessions, and I really invite you to participate and answer them in the poll tab once requested by the speaker. And just to finish, for your information, the replay of this webinar will be made available by tomorrow, and the slide deck can be sent by email upon your request. So for now, I'm pleased to hand over to Arno Guillet.
Yes, thank you very much, Chantal, for these introductions, and I'm very happy to welcome you all for this webinar. So the session will last approximately 1 hour. I will start with a very brief introduction of smart drug delivery device as a whole, and then we will switch to the topic of the day, which is smart prefilled syringes, and we'll end up with a 15-minute session, Q&A session at the end. So first, let's start with an introduction on smart drug delivery device, and just with a simple question: why are we talking about connected drug delivery device? Is it just a pure marketing gimmick, just a differentiating factor, or is there something more there? And of course, spoiler alert, there is something more, and one big issue in particular, which is treatment adherence and all its consequences. And I believe you're all familiar with the concept, so I will not bore you with all the figures and all the details, but just simply put, treatment adherence is not only bad at first for patients suffering from chronic disease, but it's getting worse and worse as time goes, and it's dropping over time. And this non-adherence issues has severe impact on the treatment efficacy and could lead to complications, relapses, hospitalizations, and potentially deaths. It's a serious issue, and also it has a significant cost impact on the pharma side with lost revenue, actual prescribed drugs that are not taken by the patients, and also it has an impact on the overall healthcare system, up to $1 trillion annually, according to certain studies. And this market is booming, so thanks to key driver. First of all, on the patient side, so the patients are really craving for this type of solutions. Patients are ready; they want access to their data. Also, due to COVID, a lot of patients tested for the first time these digital health solutions, and they actually like it, according to some studies. Also, device, IT, and software solutions are there. You have you can find on the market very well performing connected drug delivery device in the respiratory field, injectable fields. You can find very successful digital therapeutics software platforms, and also IT solution for data storage and data processing. And one last thing, the regulatory landscape that was once considered as a barrier for the implementation of such connected device is really clearing up. FDA guidelines are way clearer and way more, and I would say that FDA is way more predictable than they used to be on this specific front of connected device and medical software. The new EU MDR framework is also way clearer than the previous framework regarding this specific topic. And health data regulation, for sure, they are very demanding, but I mean, at least they provide a clear understanding on what the expectations are. So I would say overall, the environment is way more predictable, and that's very positive for innovation. But of course, some challenges remain. And first of all, and I'm being provocative, deliberately provocative on that one, patients don't care about connected device. And that comes from a very interesting survey conducted by Merck on patient preference for injection device. And patients were submitted a lot of potential answers, and actually connectivity and digital health solutions were picked last. Why is that? Simple. It's because patients don't care, and connected device, I would say, don't mean anything to patients. Don't bring anything as such to patients. It's really the software and all the service that you will build around that will give meaning to the patients. This is why you need to think broader than just the device itself, but really consider the whole ecosystem. And second issue, the HCPs on the healthcare professional side, they lack time and motivation because, of course, telemonitoring act is quite time consuming. So you need to these doctors and these practitioners are swamped. So you need to compensate the time they will spend on the telemonitoring act. And the framework for covering financially such act are very limited, aside from the new CPT codes, in the US CPT codes of 2019, which are quite good in that regard and already cover some of the telemonitoring acts. And it's only by combining and engaging these two stakeholders, the patients and the healthcare professional, that we will truly enhance the treatment, the treatment adherence and the treatment efficacy, and deliver evidence that the whole system is actually working to payers. Because payers at this stage still lack evidence. Sure, they have some elements, they have some preliminary events, data coming from relatively small cohort, from relatively limited period of time, but they need more robust data on longer periods. And that's what we need to provide to make the whole system fly. On the, so as I said, on the solution, I won't spend much time on that, just to mention that a lot of solutions are already out there on the diabetes space. Smart pen solutions are there, nice software to handle the disease management front. On PFS-based medicine, you have the smart auto-injectors, you have the smart PFS that we talked to you about today. And also on the respiratory front with propeller and Adarium, add-on sensors are already there, integrated solutions as well. So solutions are definitely there. And if we look more precisely at the objectives and economic rationale of these environments, and just ask the question how we will make it fly, this all connected drug delivery device space. To understand the graph, you have two axes, one for the services and one for the money. And you have three stakeholders, the patients, the healthcare professional, and the payers. And they all position differently in those axes. For instance, the patients, what they really want is services, not so much financial incentive. Lowering the insurance premiums could be an option, but I mean, that's not their primary objectives. For the HCPs, that would be different. As I say, telemonitoring is time consuming and should be compensated financially. So this is why you need some kind of payment system such as the CPT codes. And also to reduce the burden, because it takes time, you can design on the software side solutions to select and identify among these hundreds of patients that you will be following, the few dozens that actually need some specific interactions, which will save some time for them. And if you do that, you engage patients, you engage HCPs, and you deliver the efficacy of the treatments and the savings to the payers. And I will just end this introduction by bringing some lessons learned from diabetes, which is, as you all may know, the most mature areas for connected device. And I will look at we will discuss about the success of two smart pen solutions. One is a reusable smart insulin pen injector designed by Companion Medical that was acquired by Medtronic for a very significant amount of money. the actual figure was not disclosed, but it was way over 100 million dollars, sorry. And the other one is the Biocorp Malia Bluetooth add-on for disposable insulin pen injectors that is supported by big partnership with major players on the field, such as Sanofi and Roche Diabetes Care, and will be launched in a large scale this year in different geographies all over the world. And potentially, this device will be reaching tens of thousands of patients, potentially up to 100,000 patients for this year only. And if we look at the reasons behind these two success, it really lies in two factors. First, well-designed solution in terms of functionality, easiness to implement, compatible with standard tools, cartridge and pens, seamless for the patients. And the second criteria is ecosystem. Either they were considering and they were brought to the market with an ecosystem. So Companion Medical designed their own ecosystem proprietary with combining glucose readings and insulin readings, and Biocorp partner up with one of the most successful software in the area to bring a comprehensive service to the patients. So if you want to be successful in this connected drug delivery device space, you need to combine the well-designed device plus a successful software solutions to bring the full value of this, of the full potential of this actual device. That's it for introduction. Now, and I will take just a sip of water because I really need it at this stage. And now I will focus on the smart prefilled syringes work, which is the topic of the day. And first, let's define quickly the segments. So I will be talking about smart prefilled syringes for biologics, which are becoming by far the most important category in this area, both in volumes and values. And in this area, we are dealing with therapeutic areas such as rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, all involving weekly injections, mostly in home-based settings. And if we're considering the typical tools that are used in these areas, so basically the most common prefilled syringes format that is used for these specific drugs is a 1 ml long format, followed by a certain distance by 2.25 ml syringes. And that's not neutral if you want to consider a connected solution for these specific tools, because these two formats don't have the same diameters, doesn't have the same lengths. So you be careful on a solution that can be implemented potentially for both formats. Also, very important for this specific PFS, they are often delivered with a passive safety system, an add-on passive safety system, which is in the huge majority of the case, the famous BD UltraSafe system that I'm sure you all know. And it's a specific constraint to have in mind when you are designing your connected solution for prefilled syringes, because if, for instance, you want to install your solution, an NFC tag or Bluetooth-enabled plunger rod on your syringe, you cannot do that and be compatible with the BD UltraSafe safety system, because the plunger rod is part of the BD system, is part of this technical dossier. So changing this plunger rod is impossible, or you can deal directly with BD, but that's quite a challenge, I would say. So really important to take in mind this compatibility, And I believe that call potentially for the first poll of the day of today's session, which is the question, since there is a lot of pharma attending this webinar, I would be curious to know if for you, this BD UltraSafe passive safety compatibility is a must for your connected prefilled syringes concept. So I will invite you to go on the polls side of the webinar to place your answer there. And I will look back for the results. And it's live, so we will quickly see. So it seems at this moment that UltraSafe compatibility is clearly winning by far. I'm not really surprised about that. I will leave a few seconds and maybe we'll let it run, but I think the split is pretty clear from what I can see. I mean, compatibility with ultra-safe system seems clearly to be a must. And I invite you to participate to the polls anyway, even though I will move to the next slides. But it's very interesting to see, and it's a very, very important constraint to take into account. We'll come back to that. So now that we clarify the segments and the specific tools that you need to take into consideration for smart PFS, let's look quickly on the needs. Let's start with the patient needs. So based on the literature on this front, there is 3 needs that clearly emerge. First is easy solution for treatment monitoring, because for a huge proportion of patients, treatment adherence is a mental burden. As health industrials, we should really think about solutions that will relieve them for this specific burden. Second one is way more specific to prefilled syringes. Even though they appear from a distance very simple to use with well designed, good ergonomy, but overall, est-ce que tu peux brancher mon ordi? Sorry about that. Just want to make sure that my computer is plugged, because I seem to be running out of battery. Sorry about that. It appears to be solved. Do that again. Perfect. Now again. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's switching back and on. Oh, coming back to the topic. So as I say, well-designed solutions, but the battery, not the battery. Sorry, I was disturbed by this issue. The quite significant portion of the patients are actually challenging with the use of prefilled syringes. So any connected solutions, specifically on the software side, should think about solutions to help patients and guide patients with the use of prefilled syringes, even though they seem pretty easy to use. And one last thing is the necessity to verify and check the products before use, to make sure that it's a real fit, it's a good drug, the good concentration, and the good time to inject. That's also paramount for the patients. So overall, on the patient side, you need to bring a solution that will enable them to verify, to monitor that they're actually delivering the right medicine the right way at the right time. Now on the healthcare professional front. So there is really something missing from the healthcare professional when dealing with patients suffering from chronic conditions. And that's really the lack of data, lack of objective data on the patient's adherence to make sure that they provide an informed diagnosis on the patient's status. They need to have the adherence data. All they can rely on at this stage is the subjective patient feedbacks on that. Also, they need to know the frequency of occurrence of symptoms, complications, potential relapse, any issue that goes along with the daily life of the patients, because they are apart from the patients from quite significant times, and they are totally in the dark for that period. One last thing, and it's maybe more specific to nurses, but they have at the onboarding of the patients, when they deliver the first injections, they have a very limited time to train the patients on how to use properly the device. And that leads to issues that we saw previously. And this lack of training could severely impact adherence, not only at first, but in the long run, and will really impact the good delivery of the product. Now that we see the needs, let's talk about the actual solutions that are out there. So I will focus for this slide on the solution. I will focus only on the pure player solution. I know that there are some few internal pharma programs out there. I heard that through different trade shows, but this is not fully public information. So I would rather concentrate on the pure players only for that. So you have 2 NFC solutions and 2 Bluetooth solutions. For the NFC solution, you have the Biocorp InJ device that I have in my hand here, which is composed of an NFC tag located in the syringe plunger rod for product ID, and an activator features located in the customized finger flange. And you have the similar approach developed by Flex Technologies. And for both approach, the idea is to install this customized plunger rod and finger flange directly on the pharma assembly line, right after the drug filling. And on the user front, what you bring in terms of information are product ID, so the drug type, the expiry date, the batch number, all this information that you can encode after the drug filling at the assembly site, and you will deliver that ready to use to the patients. The fact that the injection has been complete, thanks to the activator, it will actually detect that you push down the piston rod, and of course the NFC time and date stamp that you will get from tapping the device against your smartphone. On the BLE front, you have the DALI Synex system, which is an integrated BLE plunger rod, which is also meant to be installed by the pharma company on the assembly line. And you have the add-on BLE option from Credon Med Systems that is installed by the user, and it's removable and reusable. You have to pair this system, of course, to your mobile phone, and it will get you the injected drug volume, duration of injections, and enable real-time data transfer. And of course, I'm not going to tell you which is the best fit for you and what's the best solution for you, because of course, first, I'm a bit biased, let's admit that. And second, and most importantly, it will highly depend on your use case. And I want to look into that, and that's a good opportunity maybe to launch a second poll for today's webinar, which is around what would be for you. I would be curious to know what are for you the most important information that a smart syringe can bring. And I will also invite you to participate to the poll section on the right-hand side of your screen. And I will initiate myself. I would say treatment compliance is important, but seems to be different. So yeah, I will be monitoring your answer and I will be commenting a bit, just leave you some time. So interesting, because treatment compliance, so the fact that injection has been complete, time and date stamped is the first one. And it's really a tie between correct device use, which is also critical, and the traceability of the products. That's very interesting, because I will let you finish on the poll if you want, but that's very interesting because then if we use a toolbox approach, if we look of how you can define the best technical approach for you, the first thing you need to do is identify your key functionalities. And I put in bold marks I would say what I believe could be the most important information that you need to get. And of course, you need a way to ID the product. You need to way to identify which are the drug you injected, potentially some information on the expiry date and all. You need to have a way, of course, to detect an injection. Whether it's just an injection completion, an injection drug volume, a duration on injection, that's a different story, and that's the question you need to ask. Do you really need to have the exact volume injected since it's fixed dose? Is it very important for you to get that information? Is it important for you? So of course, time and date stamp, it's critical because you have to compare it to the treatment plan. Real-time data transmission or manual step for transmission, it's a trade-off. And all these questions are really a trade-off. You know, what is for you the value of the exact volume, potential real-time data transmission versus the impact on cost, usability, potentially compatibility with systems such as the BD UltraSafe system. That's really a question you need to ask. And it brings me to your specific objectives. Is your first objective cost effectiveness? Is it maximize functionalities? Is it usability? Do you envision application for clinical trials? Maybe in that case, cost is not the primary point. Real life cost is definitely is. Is safety system compatibility a must for you or not? And that's all these elements will really clarify your technical approach, because NFC is a very cost-effective solution for sure. And I would say, there is this additional step, I would say, of scanning the data. But what is it compared to what is it compared to an add-on solution, where potentially you can also be cost effective with another Bluetooth add-on solution, but it will be add-on. So you have the impact, the usability of impacts of asking your patient to remove the device and put that on and on the device, plus the impact of the overall form factor of the device. So this is a hard trade-off between usability functions. And you have this question, yes, of course, of add-on and integrated. So if you go for integrated solutions, NFC seems to be the only choice, unless you want to go for Bluetooth. But in that case, you have two issues. First of all, sure, you don't have the extra step of scanning the device after use, but you will have the pairing. Every time you change and you switch from one syringe to another, you will have this pairing, this additional pairing step. And on top of that, you come back to the issue of the cost effectiveness of the system, because Bluetooth is necessarily an expensive technology to put to your syringe. So that's something you need to be careful on. Also, something to consider is the location where you will locate your sensors on the syringes. If you do, for instance, if you locate the sensors in the rigid needle shield, such as some internal pharma programs are considering, is purely for drug ID. You will get the drug ID, no impacts on the user process, very cost effective potentially. Usability is good, but you are limited to drug ID. If you go on the other end on the plunger rod, you might get some more interesting information about the actual use of the syringe, injection completions, potentially duration of injection, potentially drug volumes. But think about the compatibility with ultra-safe system, because if you position on the plunger rod, you cannot be compatible with this system, because as I said previously, BD plunger rod is part of the BD ultra-safe system, so you cannot touch that. And this is one of the reasons why Biocorp decided to be very flexible on the inject approach, because as I showed you previously, so the NFC tag in the standard version is located in the plunger rod and the activators in the finger flange. But the technology relies on the combination of these two sensors and the interaction of these two sensors. And our IP and the technology allow some flexibility on how you can implement these two sensors to still have the drug ID and to have this injection completion confirmation and timestamp. And we have already considered some variants of the products that are actually compatible with some safety systems, including this BD Ultra Safe, because we believe this is paramount for you. That's it for the device side. I will be very brief on the software side, because just to mention that you have to consider that, as I said previously, because it's very important to your value proposal. You have different options to partner up digital therapeutics software platforms. Some are really specialized in some therapeutic areas. Some are more generalist on chronic disease management, symptom management. Of course, some pharma company chose to have their proprietary software launch, such as for their PFS-based medicine, such as Merck with MS Dial, that's been running for quite a few years now. But really, software solution is very important to your value proposal. And that brings us to what would be the last part of the webinar, which will be, we will look into two specific applications where really the combination of device device and software will matter a lot. And you will see how software can have a very important impact on the process. And we realized at Biocorp that, for instance, for clinical trials applications, it was a very specific world, and we needed to pick and to partner up with what we believe was the best digital solution and digital options on this front. And this is why we partner up with Ardex. And now I will, for the first use case, which is a clinical trial application, I will welcome Bernard Bryans on the stage so he can present you his approach for this specific applications. And I will be right back for the real life application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnaud. Thank you for this invitation to join this Biocorp webinar, and it's a pleasure for me to give you more insight on the role of connected devices in drug development. A clinical trial can be seen as a system of selected individuals with specific conditions in whom I would say we intend to test an investigational product. So as input to this system, we have the investigational product, which we say the drug. The output of a clinical trial is really the evaluation of the safety and efficacy of that new treatment, of that new drug. However, to be successful and reliable, the clinical trial, one needs good patient adherence to the dosing regimen specified in the protocol. Because if you don't have good adherence to the dosing regimen, it puts your trials at risk because you compromise the input of the system. And with this very short introduction, I would like to introduce a question to the audience, and I would like to ask you, how frequently do you think this input is compromised? So in clinical drug trials, what proportion of patients do you think are non-adherent by month 3? Do you think it is 5%? Is it 15%? Or is it 30%? So please vote and we will discuss the results. So most of you have selected 30% of the patients are non-adherent by month 3. And I'm very pleased with that because that means you have probably, or you are aware of publications I was co-author a few years ago, where, as you can see in these publications, we analyzed data from about 17,000 patients coming from 95 drug trials. Each of those patients received an electronic package so that we can capture in real time the use of the medication intake behavior. And as you can see at month 3, we have about 30% of the patients who were non-adherent to the treatment. That means some of them never initiated the treatment, some of them discontinued the treatment, and some of them missed a significant amount of doses. But at month 3, we have about 30% of the patients who are non-adherent. And if you continue this curve, you can see that after 1 year, which is the typical length of a lot of trials, about half of the patients included in clinical trials are non-adherent to the study, to the dosing regimen specified in the study protocol. So this is a real issue, because if half of the patients involved in trials do not adhere to the dosing regimen, we compromise the input of the system, and it is impossible to derive sound inferences about the safety and the efficacy of the treatment in those conditions. And this is a major regulatory issue, which is increasingly important for the regulators when they analyze clinical trials. So what's the solution? So the solution, an appropriate solution, starts clearly with building in the clinical trial some accurate measure of medication adherence. And when we review the different methods to measure medication adherence in clinical trial, you can have self-report, you can have pill counting, you can have drug levels. But smart packages and connected devices are by far the most reliable measure, with about 97% accuracy of measuring medication adherence. So it is a very accurate measure. It is also a continuous measure that allows you to depict the behavior of medication intake of the patients. What is very important, and Arnaud stressed on that point several times previously, it doesn't add burden for the patient. So it's really frictionless for the patient. And that is very important because thanks to this feature, we get the data. The data are available for all patients included in a clinical trial. So once we have this solid measure in place, we can have a set of algorithms to process those data and have some data-driven adherence feedback to the patients. And we have demonstrated that this data-driven adherence feedback is the most effective means to empower patients and improve medication adherence in clinical trials. On average, we have an improvement in medication adherence of about 20%, and in some clinical trials, it goes up to 50% improvement in medication adherence by having this solid measure and appropriate feedback, focused feedback to the patients. So this was a natural association between Biocorp and Ardex to bring an end-to-end digital adherence solution on the market. And by bringing this solution to the market, we clearly facilitate the link between the GMP world and the GCP world in a very efficient solution that is off the shelf and that can be easily integrated in clinical trials today. By bringing this solution on the market, we address the challenges and the focus point of the different stakeholders involved in clinical trials. And I would like to consider them one by one. So first of all, for pharma companies, mitigating the risk of medication adherence in clinical trials is increasingly required. And there are three reasons for this. The first reason is that we are moving more and more into decentralized trials that recruit more and more hybrid patients, a broader variety of patients, and thus medication adherence is becoming a priority in those clinical trials. But also, when we look at the pipeline of the pharma companies today, there are increasingly molecules, treatments with a narrow therapeutic window for which medication adherence will be critical. So by bringing this system on the market, we provide a strong ROI for the pharma industry because we improve the power of the study, we reduce the delay, we avoid delays in the development phases, and to the point we avoid treatment failure, we avoid trials failure. On top of this, by including those measurements early on in the drug development process, we also collect key behavioral data with the treatment, which can be very useful for a successful post-marketing strategy to commercialize the treatment in the marketplace. Then for the technology vendors, we come with an open ecosystem, and Arnaud stressed the importance of the ecosystem of qualified partners. So really what we bring as a digital platform for medication adherence at Ardex is really an ecosystem of smart packages and devices that covers all routes of drug administration. And it is an end-to-end validated GMP GCT platform. For the patients, smart packages and devices, they provide an automatic and accurate measure of medication adherence, which is completely frictionless for the patient. And thus that allows us to collect the data, not only in the patients who engage with the system, but really we collect the data for all patients included in a clinical trial. And finally, we have to recognize for the CMO and CRO side that most CMOs are getting mature today to routinely integrate electronics in their packages and devices, that the system is fully interoperable with third-party clinical trial platforms like IRT, DC, but more recently also in platforms specialized in decentralized clinical trials. And also, it has some data standards and it is CEDIS compatible. So this is to conclude the value of the ecosystem in clinical trials. And with this, I will end my presentation and give back the word to Arnaud to show you the other use case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard, for the vision on the clinical trial side. And now I will conclude this session by talking about real-life applications of smart PFS involving a device and a software. And I've picked for this specific use case, and I've picked multiple sclerosis because it's a lifelong disease, because the most commonly used treatment options require several weekly injections, and this treatment monitoring is very important part of the proper disease management for this specific pathology. And also the symptoms monitorings are critical to the management of the disease. So to make it very, very concrete and try to help you picture how patients and doctors will benefit for such system, let's follow the patient pathway and imagine a solutions composed of three elements: a smart PFS, that for the use case will be in-jet device, which is obviously totally random pick, as you can imagine. Second, a patient mobile application for data collections, symptoms monitoring, and educational content, and a doctor's portal to collect all the data gathered by this system. And the journey starts at day one. Usually in a clinical environment, when you are onboarded with your treatment, you receive your first prescriptions. In that case, you will receive your in-jet device. You will be trained on this device. You will be onboarded in the mobile app with your treatment plan, 3 injections per week for the next 6 months. And then you are on your own. And you will receive, thanks to the app, the educational content, information about your disease, some tips to manage your treatments, to better understand the stakes. And then when we go to the moment of the injections, so ideally good software solutions will provide reminders to take your medicines based on your treatment plans. And then thanks to the in-jet device, you will scan your device against smartphones to just verify that this is the right product for you, that the product is not expired, that is the right concentration, just to make sure it complies with your treatment plan. Ideally, also, when you do that, you will have some video IFUs to explain how to use the prefilled syringes, which will really help and secure the patient in that process. Then you will deliver the drug by pushing down the piston rod. And at the end of your injections, when you are done, you will scan it against your phone to retrieve the important information, injection completion, time and date stamp of your injections. And afterward, following that, in your daily life, you will be able to do self-evaluation, quantification of your symptoms. All of this will be retrieved in the mobile app. And at the end of the day, when you will get back to the doctors will have received in a specific portals all this information, and you will be able to engage into a very meaningful conversation with these specific doctors. And if we just zoom on the doctor's portals on how it will look like, typically for a specific patient, they will be able to know if the patient were adherent or not to the treatment, quantify that, and map the frequency of symptoms and complications against the actual adherence of the patients, which will be very precious information to put an informed diagnosis. And hopefully by doing that correctly, you will engage both the patients and the doctors, and you will deliver the promise of connected drug delivery device, which is enhancing treatment efficacy. And that really concludes our session. So just to open on just simple information, obviously, so the topic of the day was biologics, but obviously you can find potential applications of such technology for prefilled syringes for vaccines, for instance. COVID is a massive topic at the moment. At the moment, they are not filled into prefilled syringes. It might come at some point. And if we look at solutions to track that the products, what products has been delivered to what patients, have a real-time coverage, a vaccination coverage, feedback, that could be some very useful tool as well in that context. Well, I will end up with these key takeaways that I will leave on the slides. I will not go down with all of them, but just to put that on the slides to conclude this session, and then we will switch to the actual Q&A session. And if I'm looking at the time, we are on time, right, Chantal?
Yes, we are. Thank you very much, Arno. Thank you, Bernard. I was just having a look at the questions tab. It seems that no questions have been given. So I guess that everything has been very, very clear for the audience. So maybe let's give them still a little bit of time if some questions come up now that you both finished your presentations. Meanwhile, I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask you. For instance, Arno, can you tell me if InJ, so the device developed by Biocorp, is already available for clinical studies?
No, it's in development. I cannot be very specific on the actual maturity of the products, but it's in development. So it's a well-advanced development stage, I would say. But it will take some time, some additional activities to put that to clinical readiness. But we are almost there, I would say.
Okay. I would like to invite Bernard if he can come back to the stage too. I have some questions for him. Arno, otherwise, can you tell me if the corrected syringe solution will only be made available for 1 ml standard glass syringes, or if it will be available also for other formats of syringes, or maybe other material than glass?
No, it's easily adaptable to different formats of PFS. So of course, if we look at biologics, this is really the primary format that we'll be look at. But 2.25 ml is easy to adapt. It's just a question of adapting diameters of the piston rods and adapting to the specific formats. Also, we will be adapting, as I said, because of this flexibility, inherent flexibility of the system, we can also adapt to a lot of safety systems out there. So it's really, I mean, this is really the advantage of the technology, is to allow maximum flexibility to be compatible with whatever tools the patients are actually using and are actually of interest for our pharma partners.
Okay. Thank you. Bernard, can you tell me, your software application seems really very complete by offering the possibility for connecting different devices to only one platform for your clinical studies. But would it also be made available for real-life applications, so beyond clinical use?
Absolutely, and not the platform as such, but certainly the algorithmic that is behind the platform, which will process the data and make sense of adherence data, can be integrated in disease management platform and in patients management platform. Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a first question coming from the audience, from Sonia. So she's asking, can you comment and expand on the various types of phones and software and the ability to keep the app in a validated stage? I don't know who wants to answer this question.
No, I will take that time. Just rereading that again. So comment and expand on the various types of phones and software and the ability. Yeah, so you mean, I guess, the compatibility with the phone. So most of the phones nowadays and the new version release are equipped with NFC technology. I would say the way to track the device is a bit different from if you consider smartphones versus Android phones. You have an extra steps required in iOS phones to actually put on a scan mode your smartphone to retrieve the data with a smartphone. And on the Android side, it's way more linear when you just have to place it against the smartphones. But all of them are equipped. And I would say, sorry, so can you comment and explain the various types of phone and software? Yes.
Maybe I can add one thing. If it's related to clinical trials, it is clear that there are multiple versions of apps that are dedicated for clinical trials. And for one trial, the app is fixed, so that you can guarantee the regulatory aspect of it within a clinical trial, that it is stable from the beginning to the end. It will be the same app for a given clinical trial. So all those aspects within clinical trials we manage.
Okay, so new question comes up for Bernard. If you see a patient is not adhering to their medication in a clinical trial, what kind of interventions would you consider to get them back on track? And how quickly do you need this information in order to keep them in the study?
Yes, and that's a very good point. You have to know that there are many reasons for non-adherence, and some are intentional, some are not intentional. But what we do, our system processes the data, and we identify specific behavior that we can pinpoint to the healthcare professionals or the ones who is in charge of the study, so that they can have a focused discussion with the patient. and that has a drastic change in the behavior of the patient. So compared to when you don't have those data, for example, you have to fish. You have to say, "Oh, are you sure you take your medication?" and so on. Now the focus discussion can say, "Hey, every Saturday you miss a dose. What's happening on Saturday?" and fix it immediately. Or you have stopped for 3 days. Why? Can we get you back on track? And so on. So this is a very focused discussion that is guided by the software. It can happen at point of care, and it can happen in between visits, because if you use an app, then the data are transferred in real time, and you can have an interventionist calling the patient at any time during the study. Both are possible.
Okay, thank you, Bernard, for answering this question. I have another question for you, Bernard. In which disease do you see the most concerns about medication adherence?
Okay, originally, we have seen the most concerned in what we call infectious diseases, because the problem of adherence is not only on the lack of efficacy, but it's also on the development of resistance. But since then, we see a major issue in all the CNS area, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, and primarily depression, where we see very, very poor adherence. And we have to be careful, and now we have more and more studies showing that there are a lot of disease states like RA, MS, and oncology, where there is a very high proportion of depression. And we see very poor adherence in those treatments area, to the point that in a recent oncology study with acute leukemia in children, we had 40% of non-adherence, 40% of the children with non-adherence, leading to a threefold relapse rate. So we see the problem across diseases, but any disease that is associated to depression, we see worse adherence.
Okay, that's very clear. Are there any further questions at the audience? For the time being, no. We have still a couple of minutes left. Arno, maybe can you tell me, I saw a great list of functionalities for connected syringes in your slide deck, but what about the possibility to identify counterfeit drugs with the help of added connectivity to check its authenticity, if it's a real medicine produced by the pharma company or if it's a fake? Is there any possibility of adding such functionality to InJ, for instance?
Yeah, but I mean, it all comes down. It's a good question. It all comes down to your use case. I mean, what are your expectations with this connectivity? Is it about traceability? Traceability, yeah, there is a lot of things that you can do if you encode the product information right from the manufacturing line. You can really have a unique way to identify products right from the beginning. So you will have this in a way you can scan this information and verify this is the actual product and not a counterfeit. This is one of the options you can add on top of that. Even though Biocorp is more focusing on the treatment adherence side of things at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Still no additional questions. So maybe we can conclude for today. And of course, if there's any other questions that come up by the audience, you can always send us an email and we will be more than happy to answer them. So I really would like to thank everyone, you speakers, Arno, Bernard, and also the audience, to have joined us for this webinar. And just to remind you that the replay will be ready and available by tomorrow. And of course, we will looking forward to welcoming you to our next events that will be organized by webinar, and we will keep you, of course, informed for that. So thank you, everyone. Stay safe and goodbye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.